Every one of us reaches moments in life when the answers we've been given are no longer enough. It's the questions that drive us forward. That's where the real journey begins. This is where today's podcast will begin as well. Welcome to Mystical Journeys with Jase. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Mystical Journeys with Jase. I want to start today a little differently than I normally do because this isn't really an episode in the way that the last 29 have been. This one's a turning point, and I want to walk you through it because I think it matters not just for the show, but for you. Looking back over the last 35 years, I don't think my life was changed by the answers I found. It was changed by the questions I finally heard the courage to ask. And that's really what today is about. Not answers, but questions. So let me tell you how I got here. I was 17 years old. I was getting ready for a wrestling match. And I remember I'm jumping up and doing a little bit of jump rope and getting ready for this match. I didn't realize that moment, that was going to be the beginning of where my life was going to change into a direction that I wasn't expecting. I go out, I'm wrestling with this guy, and I'm doing pretty well. And I used a move called a leg in. And I reach over and I'm trying to grab the guy, and he twists to the left, but I twist to the right. And all of a sudden there was this popping sound. And my father told me later on that night that he had heard the sound all the way up where he was at the top of the bleachers. Finishing up the match, because I wouldn't give up on my team, I was hurt really badly. And that was just really, really difficult. And I barely got back to the match, and I limped through the match, but I worked my way through it. After I got home, I was amazingly tired for some reason. I was definitely very weak from not really getting enough food. I have to say that when you're in wrestling in high school, I'll tell you what, it puts a strain on your body. And a couple of days later, I realized I was just feeling so bad that I had no energy whatsoever. And when I was laying there, my mother came up to check on me, and I told her, I'm like, Mom, I can't get out of bed. And my father, of course, in his stern voice said, just get up, darn it. I tried to get up and I fell because I had no energy whatsoever in my body. I pushed off the dresser drawer and hit the floor pretty hard, and I just couldn't get up. I literally had no energy. My father and my mother finally take me down to the hospital. And what I found at that point was I'd had an actual pneumonia had developed. So here I am in this hospital, and I'm running this temperature. And as I recall, it was 106.9 temperature. From what I remember, I was in the area where they have to have 24-hour monitoring of me. I was going to say that it would have to be ICU because the nursing station was all that I could see from where my bed was. There were people constantly walking in. I was hooked up to all kinds of machines. I had a ventilator on me. It was a pretty bad situation. I remember when my high school sweetheart came in to talk to me, and she just wanted to have some alone time with me. And she told me that they wanted to put me into the cool water tank just to try to get my temperature to go down. But they were not sure if it was going to kill me or not. And she just begged me. She said, please try to get better. Just try to get better. Well, I remember that night. I was looking over the side of my bed, and it looked as though there was a mist that was between me and something else that I remember. I was like, I remember thinking very clearly, wow, if I could just get through that mist, there's all kinds of things that were there that could probably teach me and share with me all kinds of different things that I really might want to learn. And while I'm living in this life, I could just tap into some things that not everybody would be able to tap into. I remember it was the moment that I had been running a temperature for several days. I woke up a little bit and I just said, Great Spirit, I said, look, if you really want me to move forward with my life, and my girlfriend's really scared for me right now, I'd like to ask you to just please save me. Get me through this. And I will start trying to look through that mist I saw earlier. And I'll start trying to live my life in a way that helps others. All I can say is that at that moment, I seem to remember passing out again. Well, that following morning, I woke up and my temperature had actually dropped down to 104.7. Now, keep in mind, I'm going in and out of consciousness, so it's hard to say what was my imagination and what was some vision that I saw or something like that. Let me just say that in a few days, I had quite the adventure in the hospital, especially when I walked out of the room and heard on the overhead speaker hospital staff calling my name to please report back to my room. Well, I ended up getting back to the room. I ended up recovering. I ended up going home, and my life ended up taking a very major course correction. I ended up becoming even more insightful than the way that I was. I ended up wanting to make different choices than where I expected my life to be. Whatever had happened, it did something to me that a 17-year-old is just not prepared for. It stripped away the assumption that I'd grown up with, that the adults around me, the doctors, the people I trusted had all the answers, because they didn't. Nobody did at that moment. There was more to connect than just people asking you to sign hospital forms. And that's a strange thing to learn at 17. After this, I remember having no acceptable answers, just a bunch of questions, big ones. Why is this happening? Why me? What am I supposed to do with this? And for the first time in my life, nobody handed me a simple explanation. I had to go looking for the answers myself. So that's what I did. I started asking deeper questions, not the kind you ask and just move on from, but the kind that follow you around for years. They tap you on the shoulder at the worst possible moments. And that search turned into most of my life. Anyhow, 35 years working with thousands of people and one voice, one story, one session at a time. 35 years of traveling, sitting with indigenous elders and wisdom keepers, learning traditions that had nothing to do with where I grew up, but everything to do with what I was actually looking for. I sat in circles where nobody spoke my language, and I could just understand almost exactly what was being said. I learned that wisdom doesn't need translation the way that information does. 35 years of studying, shamanic practice, and energy work, and eventually voice analysis itself. That part of surprised me the most. Honestly, I didn't set out to become a voice analysis practitioner or work in shamanism the way that I do. But the deeper I got into energy work, the more I kept noticing that the frequencies in people's voices were telling me things their words weren't. 26 years now, digging into that voice reveals, it's been some really amazing work. And 35 years of exploring and studying and experiencing and trying to make sense of all of this and all the things that I had picked up over the years. And here's the thing that took me the longest to see. After all that traveling, after all that studying, after all those conversations with those different people and those different places, I started to notice something. everyone is asking a similar handful of questions. Doesn't matter what their age is, or their background, where they grew up, or what they believe in walking in the door. A grieving mother in one city, a burnout executive in another, a 22-year-old who can't explain why she cries in her car in parking lots. Strip away the details, and it's a similar handful of questions over and over again. That realization is the whole reason we're having this conversation today. Because once you see that pattern, you can't unsee it. And I started to feel like it would almost be irresponsible of me to keep making the show about handing you more information when I kept watching session after session. What people were finally realizing just in a moment that they had their question right out loud. I remember one ceremony in particular. I won't get into every detail here. That's a conversation for another day. But I remember sitting there watching an elder work and realizing that nobody in the circle was being handed an answer. They were being handed a different kind of question before I had before. People that I've met, the more that I realize we're all asking similar questions. So today, I just want to say a few of them out loud and let them sit with you for a minute instead of rushing past them like we usually do. Why am I here? Not in the abstract cosmic sense. I mean, in your actual life, this week, at the job, in this house. Why am I here doing this? Being this person? I've watched grown adults hear that question out loud for the first time for years, and they go quiet for a second. Something like inside them finally found a way to give themselves permission to ask it. Why do I feel different? Like there's a version of you that just doesn't quite fit the room you're standing in. No matter how many rooms you've tried, no matter how much you've adjusted to fit yourself in. Why to repeat the same patterns over and over again, even when we know better, even when we can see it happening in real time and still can't seem to stop it? The same relationships, wearing a different face, same argument, but just with some different words. Why do some people drain me by just being near them, while others give me energy without even trying? You already know who they are in your life. You've never needed anyone to explain that one to you. You just needed permission to trust what you already felt. Can I trust my intuition? Or am I making all this up? Taking some time to think about things. What do I want to be true here? What are my dreams trying to tell me, if anything at all? Or are they just noise? Is it the mind cleaning house when we sleep? Those are the conversations we're beginning today. Not questions I'm going to hand you some tidy answers to in the next 10 minutes, because that would completely miss the point. These are questions worth sitting with, worth returning to, and worth actually living inside of for a while. Let me give you one small example of what I mean. I did a shamanic counseling reading not too long ago. I won't use her name, for a woman who came in convinced that she wanted to know why she was just not on the right career path. That's the question she brought me. But about 10 minutes in, listening to how her voice moved and her energy around her, it was obvious the real question underneath really wasn't about her career at all. It was, why do I keep choosing people who drain me? Why do I keep choosing these types of situations? She even realized that the question she was actually carrying, until she heard it out loud, she didn't realize that her real question was those. That's the moment that I live for in this work. Not handing someone an exact answer, but helping them finally hear their own question so they can pursue it. All right. Let me tell you why I'm bringing this all up right now on this episode. When I started this podcast, I wanted to give you the tools I wish I had had when I began my journey. That's why the first 30 episodes focused on foundations, grounding, intuition, dreams, gratitude, energy, authenticity. I wanted you to have a toolbox before ever I asked you to do anything with it. The majority of people could use a starting point for their spirituality and personal growth. So I decided to give some beginner tools to initiate that growth. Over the years, I've realized something. Knowledge isn't always what people are missing. Most of you listening already know more than you give yourselves credit for. You're not short on information. You might be short on some clarity, as most of us are. You're carrying questions you don't even know how to ask out loud. Not to a friend, not to a therapist, not even to yourself in the mirror at 2 a.m. So from this point forward, I'd like this podcast to become more of a conversation. We'll still explore spirituality. We will still talk about consciousness, past lives, intuition, energy, personal growth, all of it. Everything you've come to expect in this podcast. But instead of starting with the answers the way I have for the first 30 episodes, we're going to start with the questions. Here's a few to consider. Why do I feel different? Why do I keep repeating the same patterns? How do I better myself to trust my intuition? Why do some people drain my energy? What are my dreams trying to tell me? How do I know if I'm actually living authentically? Those are conversations we're going to have together. Yes, us. Actually sitting with the questions that are very real for you right now in your life. Here's what this means going forward. Some episodes that might mean a guest sitting across from me and us working through one of these questions in real time instead of me smoothing it over to get it into a quick 10-minute lesson. Some episodes, it might be you and me, and I take one single question, just one, and we sit inside it for the full 20 minutes to half hour instead of going past it to get to the next teaching point. Several of you know that I've stated before that I talk to about 100 people a year in these one-on-one conversations. Sometimes it's more. And not too long ago, someone said, Jase, I wish you just did our conversations as a podcast. And that stopped me for a second. And I thought, that's exactly what I love. Being casual, actually discussing things and seeing where the energy of this conversation wants to go. That's the reason why I'm making this adjustment to the show, because those conversations have really helped people. I've had them with in many ways over the years. I think everybody listening can benefit too. I want to be honest with you. This is a bit scary for me too. It's a lot easier to teach from the answers I already have than to sit publicly with questions I've had to work out for myself. But I think that's actually the point. If I'd like others to ponder questions inside themselves, I want to ponder them in this podcast and add some usable answers. If you've been here since episode 1, thank you. You've watched this thing grow from a guy talking about grounding and gratitude and into whatever this is turning into now. And you've been patient with me while I figured out everything that I actually wanted this podcast to become. That patience means more to me than you probably know. And if today's your first episode you found, well, welcome. You didn't stumble in on some random Tuesday. I think you're arriving at the exact right time. So here's what I'd like you to do for this week. Pick one of those questions, just one, and actually sit with it. Don't try to answer it right away. Don't reach for a book or a podcast or even this one get it to solve it for you. Just carry it around with you for a few days, like a stone in your pocket. Notice when it shows up in traffic, at dinner, at 2 in the morning. Notice what it stirs in you. That noticing is the actual work. And this is where all of this starts. And if you want, drop it in some of the comments on the Facebook channel or the YouTube channel. Let's start the conversation there, even before we get to the next episode. I read every single one. And honestly, some of the best moments in this new direction are going to come from what you bring to me and what we're able to share with others. And if this new direction is something you want to see grow, if you'd like to help with the show while it's getting to be something bigger, you can always support it through my coffee page link below. Share this channel with a friend, and then they can go along and grow with you as well. I found that when you invite a friend to your conversation, you grow along with them. All right. I'll see you next time. And until then, thank yourself because you deserve it for showing up today, for being willing to sit with a question and ponder it. It's going to help with all of our growth. I know people have heard this from me before. The proof's in the results. Thank you.